The champagne tower collapsed in a glittering cascade of crystal and gold, and Tamsin Harlow stood at the center of the catastrophe, frozen in horror as 200 wedding guests turned to stare. It had started with a wasp. A single, determined wasp that had landed on her wrist just as she was stepping backward to let a servant pass. She'd flinched, her elbow catching the edge of the table, and then physics had done the rest. Glasses tumbled like dominoes. Champagne arced through the air in sparkling ribbons. The centerpiece of white roses toppled sideways, scattering petals across the pristine tablecloth, and Tamsin, desperately grabbing for something to steady herself, found only empty air. She braced for impact with the marble floor. It never came. Strong hands caught her mid-fall, one arm wrapping around her waist, onto the other gripping her shoulder. She found herself pressed against a chest that smelled of sandalwood and something darker, looking up into a face she didn't recognize. The man was perhaps 30, with black hair swept back from features that seemed carved from stone, high cheekbones, a jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and eyes the color of a winter sea, blue-gray with depths that seemed to pierce straight through her. He didn't release her immediately. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that made her skin flush hot beneath her borrowed silk gown. "Are you injured?" His voice was low, controlled, carrying an accent of aristocratic precision. Tamsin's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Behind her, she could hear the whisper starting, rushing through the crowd like wind through wheat. Clumsy thing. Knocked the entire display. That's the other Harlow girl, isn't it? The graceless one. Poor Ginevra, having her wedding ruined by her own sister. The words stabbed into her chest like needles. She pulled away from the stranger's grip, stumbling slightly as her slippers found purchase on the champagne-slicked floor. "I'm fine," she managed. "I'm so terribly sorry. I didn't mean to. There was a wasp, and She was babbling. She knew she was babbling. But she couldn't seem to stop. Not with everyone watching. Not with her mother's face going pale across the ballroom. Not with her sister's new husband, looking like he'd swallowed something sour. And not with this man, this stranger, still staring at her as if she were the only person in the room. "A wasp," he repeated, and something flickered in those blue-gray eyes. Amusement. Mockery. She couldn't tell. "I should help clean this." Tamsin dropped to her knees, reaching for the scattered crystal, desperate for something to do with her trembling hands. "Don't." His command stopped her cold. "You'll cut yourself." "I've already ruined everything. What's a little blood?" The bitter laugh escaped before she could stop it. She heard his sharp intake of breath, felt rather than saw him crouch beside her. "Leave it." His voice was softer now, meant only for her ears. "The servants will manage. You're making it worse by staying here." He was right. She knew he was right. Every second she remained at the center of this disaster, the whispers grew louder, the stares more pointed. But standing up meant facing them all. Standing up meant walking past her sister's disappointed eyes, her mother's mortified expression, on the sea of silk and jewels that had never accepted her, and now had perfect proof of why. "I can't move," she whispered, and was horrified to feel tears pricking at her eyes. "If I move, I'll probably knock something else over." The stranger made a sound that might have been a laugh, quickly suppressed. "Then allow me." Before she could protest, he stood, drawing her up with him. His hand remained at her elbow, firm and guiding, as he turned them both toward the garden doors. "What are you doing?" "Removing you from the spectacle." He moved with purpose, cutting a path through the crowd that parted for him, like waves before a ship's prow. "Unless you'd prefer to remain on display." Tamsin caught fragments of conversation as they passed. "Is that the Duke of Hartwell? What's he doing with the Harlow girl? Perhaps he's escorting her out. Someone should. Duke." The word crashed through her awareness like thunder. She was being led from her sister's wedding by a duke whose coat, she now noticed, was stained dark with champagne where she'd fallen against him. A duke who had every reason to be furious with her, and yet was steering her toward fresh air and privacy, with something almost like protection. The garden doors opened onto a terrace overlooking manicured lawns. Tamsin gulped the cool evening air, feeling it soothe her burning cheeks. "Better?" the Duke asked. "No." She pulled her arm free, turning to face him. "I've just destroyed my sister's wedding celebration, humiliated my family, in front of everyone who matters, and apparently assaulted a duke with champagne. Better is not the word I'd use." He tilted his head, studying her again with that disconcerting focus. "You didn't assault me. You fell. Onto you. With champagne. I've endured worse." His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. "Though I confess, most people wait until at least the second meeting before dousing me in alcohol." Tamsin stared at him, uncertain whether he was mocking her or attempting humor. "I don't know who you are," she said finally, "beyond your title." "Evander Ashcroft." He offered it like a simple fact, as if every drawing room in England didn't whisper his name with reverence or fear. "And you are Miss Tamsin Harlow, the sister who was not supposed to be noticed this evening." The accuracy of that statement hit her like a physical blow. "How do you know that?" "Because no one has introduced us. Because your gown, while lovely, is clearly borrowed. And because you've spent the entire evening trying to disappear into the wallpaper." His blue-gray eyes held hers. "You're very bad at disappearing, Miss Harlow." She had no response to that. None at all. From inside, the orchestra started playing again, the music bright and determined, as if trying to drown out the memory of disaster. The celebration was continuing without her, as it should, as it always did. "I should go back," Tamsin said, though her feet refused to move. "I need to apologize to Ginevra, to our mother, to everyone. That would be unwise. Hiding out here would be cowardly. Strategic retreat is not cowardice." The Duke moved to stand beside her at the terrace railing, his shoulder nearly brushing hers. "Give them time to find new gossip. By supper, someone else will have done something scandalous, and your champagne incident will be forgotten. You don't know this crowd. I know every crowd like this." Something bitter crept into his voice. "They're identical in their cruelty, and their short attention spans." Tamsin glanced at him, surprised by the edge in his words. What did a duke know of being on the receiving end of society's cruelty? But before she could ask, the terrace door burst open, and everything got considerably worse. Ginevra swept onto the terrace in a cloud of white silk and barely contained fury, her perfect blonde curls trembling with each step. Behind her came their mother, Lady Harlow, whose expression suggested she was calculating exactly how much damage control would be required. Following close behind was Felix Grimley, a family friend who'd known the Harlow sisters since childhood. Felix had always been charming, but unreliable, the sort of man who promised much and delivered little. He caught Tamsin's eye with a sympathetic grimace. And behind them all, gliding like a swan through troubled waters, came a woman Tamsin didn't recognize, dark-haired and elegant in ice-blue silk, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. "There you are." Ginevra's voice could have frozen the fountain. "I've been looking everywhere. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I'm sorry." The words came out small, inadequate. "Ginevra, I'm so sorry. There was a wasp, and A wasp," her sister laughed without humor. "Of course. There's always something, isn't there? A loose stone, a slippery floor, a convenient insect. You've been tripping and stumbling and ruining things since we were children." "Ginevra," their mother said quietly, "perhaps this isn't the moment." "When is the moment, Mother? When is it ever the moment?" Ginevra's eyes glistened with angry tears. This was supposed to be perfect. My wedding. The one day that was supposed to be about me. And she couldn't even stand still without causing a catastrophe. Each word landed like a blow. Tamsin felt herself shrinking, becoming smaller. wishing the terrace stones would simply open and swallow her whole. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. "You never mean to. That's almost worse." The woman in ice blue stepped forward, her voice silk over steel. "Perhaps, Lady Whitmore, you might allow your sister a moment to compose herself. The Duke was kind enough to remove her from the situation." She emphasized the title with deliberate weight, and Tamsin watched her sister's expression shift from anger to calculation in a single heartbeat. "Your Grace." Ginevra dipped into a curtsy so graceful it made Tamsin feel even more inadequate. "Forgive me. I didn't realize you were acquainted with my sister. We met this evening." The Duke's voice was carefully neutral. "Miss Harlow required assistance, and I provided it." "How gallant." The dark-haired woman moved closer, placing herself between Tamsin and the Duke with practiced ease. Evander always was the rescuer of lost causes. The familiarity in her tone, the use of his Christian name, told Tamsin everything she needed to know about their relationship. "Lady Sophronia." The Duke's acknowledgement was cool. "I didn't realize you'd be attending. The Whitmores and the Blackwoods have been connected for generations. I could hardly miss such an occasion." Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she glanced at Tamsin, though I confess the entertainment was more dramatic than expected. Tamsin felt heat flood her face again. "Sophronia." Lady Harlow's voice carried a warning. "My daughter has had a difficult evening." Clearly. Sophronia's gaze swept over Tamsin's borrowed gown, the champagne stains darkening the pale pink silk. "That dress doesn't quite fit, does it?" One can always tell when a gown wasn't made for its wearer. The cruelty was so casual, so perfectly delivered, that Tamsin almost admired it. This woman knew exactly how to wound without appearing to try. "The gown fits perfectly well." The Duke spoke before Tamsin could respond. "It's the company that seems ill-suited." Silence fell like a blade. Sophronia's smile remained fixed, but something dangerous flickered in her dark eyes. "You've developed an interesting sense of humor, Evander." "Have I? I wasn't aware I was joking." The tension between them crackled like lightning before a storm. Tamsin looked from one to the other, understanding dawning slowly. This wasn't just acquaintance. This was history, complicated and sharp-edged. "Ginevra." Percival Whitmore appeared in the doorway, his handsome face creased with concern. "The guests are asking for you. We should return." Her sister took a breath, visibly composing herself. When she looked at Tamsin again, the fury had been replaced by something colder, more distant. "We'll discuss this tomorrow. Try not to destroy anything else before the night is over." She swept back inside on her husband's arm, their mother following with one last worried glance over her shoulder. Felix hesitated, giving Tamsin an apologetic shrug before trailing after them. Sophronia lingered, her gaze moving between Tamsin and the Duke with obvious displeasure. "Don't let me interrupt your rescue mission, Your Grace." Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "I'll be inside whenever you tire of charity work." She departed in a whisper of ice blue silk, leaving Tamsin alone with the Duke once more. "I'm sorry," Tamsin said immediately. "Whatever that was, whatever history exists between you, I've clearly made it worse." "You've done nothing of the sort." He turned back to the railing, his profile hard against the darkening sky. "Lady Sophronia and I have an understanding, or rather, she believes we do." "And you don't?" "I believe she wants something I'm not prepared to give." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Tamsin knew she should leave it alone, knew this was none of her concern, but curiosity overcame caution. "What does she want?" "You're remarkably direct, Miss Harlow. I've already humiliated myself beyond redemption tonight. What's a little inappropriate conversation to add to the list?" That earned her another hint of a smile. "She wants to be the Duchess of Hartwell. Her family has been angling for the match since my father's death 2 years ago. My grandmother supports the connection. But you don't." "I don't want to marry anyone." The words came out flat, Final. Not Sophronia. Not any of the suitable candidates my grandmother parades before me. I have no interest in being someone's prize or someone's escape from financial ruin. Tamsin thought of her own family's circumstances, the careful economies, the borrowed gowns, and the desperate hope that Ginevra's advantageous marriage might lift them all. Some of us don't have the luxury of avoiding marriage, she said quietly. No. He looked at her with sudden intensity. I don't suppose you do. Something shifted in his expression, a calculation forming behind those storm-colored eyes. Tamsin felt a chill run down her spine, though she couldn't have said why. Miss Harlow, I have a proposition for you. I should probably return inside. Hear me first. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. You need to escape your current situation. I need to escape mine. There may be a way we can help each other. I don't understand. Not here. He glanced toward the ballroom doors. Tomorrow. I'll send my carriage at 2 o'clock. We'll talk properly. Why would I get into a stranger's carriage? Because you're desperate. His words were brutal in their honesty. Because your sister despises you. Your mother doesn't know how to help you. And by morning, every drawing room in London will be discussing the graceless Harlow girl who ruined the wedding of the season. I'm offering you an alternative. Tamsin's breath caught. He was right about everything, and they both knew it. What kind of alternative? The kind that requires privacy to discuss. He reached into his coat pocket, withdrew a card, and pressed it into her hand. 2 o'clock, Miss Harlow, unless you'd prefer to face tomorrow's judgment alone. He bowed with precise formality and walked back toward the ballroom, leaving her standing in the darkness, with his card clutched in her trembling fingers. The door closed behind him, and Tamsin looked down at the elegant script. Evander Ashcroft, Duke of Hartwell. Ashworth House. Grosvenor Square. What had she gotten herself into? And more importantly, what choice did she have but to find out? The carriage arrived at precisely 2 o'clock, gleaming black with the Hartwell crest in silver on the door. Tamsin watched it from her bedroom window, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd barely slept. The night had passed in a blur of recriminations, her mother's disappointed sighs, and the memory of Ginevra's cold dismissal at the wedding breakfast. Her sister hadn't spoken to her at all, had looked through her as if she were made of glass. The graceless one, the whispers had continued. Did you see? Right into the Duke of Hartwell's arms. Probably planned the whole thing. As if Tamsin could plan anything. As if she'd deliberately humiliated herself in front of half the aristocracy to catch a duke's attention. But someone, apparently, believed otherwise, because here was his carriage, waiting. Miss? The housekeeper's voice came through her door. There's a carriage outside. The driver says you're expected. Tamsin took a breath, steadied herself, and descended the stairs. Her mother was waiting in the foyer, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Where are you going? Out. In a strange carriage? Tamsin, after last night. After last night. What does it matter? The bitterness escaped before she could stop it. I'm already ruined, Mother. Everyone thinks I threw myself at a duke. How much worse can a carriage ride make things? Lady Harlow's hand caught her arm. That's the Duke of Hartwell's carriage. Yes. You can't simply, Tamsin. What are you doing? I don't know yet. She gently freed herself. But I know staying here, waiting for the next whisper, the next pitying look, the next reminder that I'll never be Ginevra, isn't working. The Duke offered me an alternative. I'm going to hear what it is. She left before her mother could argue further. The carriage interior was all dark velvet and polished wood, more luxurious than anything Tamsin had ever experienced. She sat rigidly upright as they moved through London's streets, not watching the city pass through the window and trying not to imagine what awaited her. Ashworth House was enormous, a cream-colored facade with columns that seemed designed to intimidate, windows that gleamed like watchful eyes. Servants appeared instantly, helping her down, guiding her through doors that opened as if by magic. She was shown into a library that stole her breath. Books everywhere, floor to ceiling, thousands of them in leather and gilt. A fire crackled in a massive hearth despite the mild afternoon. Deep chairs positioned for reading, a desk covered in papers, and standing before the window, his back to her, the Duke of Hartwell. "You came." He turned, and she saw genuine surprise in his expression. "I wasn't certain you would." Neither was I. Tamsin remained near the door, unwilling to venture further until she understood the terrain. "You mentioned an alternative. I'm here to listen." Direct again. Something like approval flickered across his features. "Sit. Please." She chose a chair near the fire, positioning herself where she could see both him and the exit. He noticed, and that subtle curve of his lips appeared again. "You don't trust me. I don't know you. Fair." He moved to a chair across from her, lowering himself with controlled grace. "Let me be equally direct then. My grandmother is determined to see me married by season's end. Lady Sophronia is her chosen candidate. I have no interest in becoming Sophronia's husband." "Then refuse." "I have. Repeatedly. It hasn't mattered." His jaw tightened. "My grandmother controls significant portions of the family estate. Portions I need to maintain our tenants, our staff, our obligations. She's made it clear that access will be restricted unless I comply with her wishes." Tamsin's eyes widened. She'd blackmail her own grandson. She'd call it motivation. The bitterness in his voice was unmistakable. "She believes she knows what's best for me, for the family name, for the future of Hartwell. What does this have to do with me? Last night, you fell into my arms in front of 200 witnesses." He leaned forward, his blue-gray eyes intent. "By this morning, half of London believes you threw yourself at me deliberately. A fortune hunter, they're calling you. A schemer. I'm not. I know you're not. That's precisely why this could work." He stood, moving to the fire, his silhouette dark against the flames. "I need someone to pose as my potential match, someone convincing enough to derail my grandmother's plans, but temporary enough to disappear when the charade is no longer necessary. Someone society has already decided is reaching above her station, so her eventual departure will be seen as inevitable rather than suspicious." Understanding crashed over her like cold water. "You want to use me? I want to offer you an opportunity." He turned to face her. "You play the role of my romantic interest for the remainder of the season. Attend balls, dinners, events, all on my arm. My grandmother won't be able to force Sophronia on me if I'm publicly pursuing someone else. And when it ends, when you've escaped your grandmother's trap and I've served my purpose, you walk away with enough money to secure your family's future. Letters of reference that will open any door you choose, and a story, carefully crafted, that paints you as the one who ended things. The sensible young woman who realized a ducal match wasn't for her, after all." Tamsin's mind raced. It was insane, utterly, completely insane. And yet, she thought of her mother's tired eyes, the stack of unpaid bills hidden in the study desk, the way creditors had begun to circle since her father's death 3 years ago. She thought of Ginevra's cold dismissal, the borrowed gown she'd worn last night that still hung in her wardrobe, a reminder that nothing in her life truly belonged to her. What precisely would this role require? The Duke's expression sharpened with interest. "You'd stay at Ashworth House as a guest, attend social functions, allow me to show public attention, dance with you, and seek your company. Nothing improper. Nothing that would truly compromise you. Staying in a bachelor's household is improper by itself. My sister Sabine is in residence. You'd be presented as her companion, a friend from her school days. The connection provides cover. I've never met your sister. She's already agreed to the fiction. She finds my grandmother's matchmaking schemes exhausting and is eager to assist. Tamsin stood, needing to move, to think. She walked to the bookshelves, letting her fingers trail along the spines, the way she did when her thoughts became too tangled. Your grandmother. What happens when she investigates my background? She'll find what I intend her to find. A gentlewoman's daughter of reduced circumstances. Respectable, but poor. Sympathetic enough to deflect criticism. Unsuitable enough that my eventual decision to end things will seem wise rather than cruel. You've thought this through. I've had 2 years to watch my grandmother manipulate every aspect of my life. Yes, I've thought this through. She turned to face him. I have conditions. Surprise flickered across his features, quickly suppressed. Do you? If I'm going to be called a fortune hunter regardless, I might as well negotiate like one. She lifted her chin. First, my mother receives a sum sufficient to clear our outstanding debts immediately, before I agree to anything. I won't have her suffering while I play games with aristocrats. A muscle ticked in his jaw, but he nodded. Done. Second, when this ends, I want your written guarantee of the compensation you've promised. Money and letters of reference. I documented and witnessed. Reasonable. Third, she hesitated, then pushed forward. The moment you decide to pursue a real match, whether it's Lady Sophronia or someone else, and this arrangement ends immediately, I won't be kept dangling while you conduct genuine courtships behind the curtain. You think I'd do that? I think I don't know you well enough to predict what you'd do. That's why I want it agreed upon explicitly. He studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. You have more spine than I expected, Miss Harlow. I have more to lose than you do, Your Grace. Desperation makes for excellent negotiating leverage. He laughed, the sound startling them both. It transformed his face, softened the harsh lines, made him look younger and almost approachable. Very well. Now your 3 conditions are accepted. He crossed to her, extending his hand. Do we have an agreement? Tamsin looked at his outstretched hand. Long fingers, elegant and strong. A hand that had caught her when she fell. A hand that was now offering her a lifeline, or possibly a trap. One more thing. His eyebrow rose. You said 3 conditions. This isn't a condition. It's a question. She met his eyes directly. Why me? You could have hired any actress in London for this role. Someone who wouldn't require explanation. Someone without a family to protect, or a reputation already in tatters. Why approach the clumsy girl who ruined your evening? The Duke was silent for a beat too long. Because, he said finally, when I caught you last night, you didn't simper or flatter or try to extend the moment. You were mortified, genuinely, thoroughly mortified. You wanted nothing from me except escape. That's not exactly a recommendation. It's exactly a recommendation. His voice dropped. I spend every day surrounded by people who want something. My title, my money, my influence. Every smile is calculated. Every word is a negotiation. But you, Miss Harlow, you just wanted to disappear. He stepped closer, and she caught that scent again. Sandalwood and something darker. I'm tired of being wanted for what I represent. You seemed capable of wanting nothing at all. That's rarer than you know. The words settled between them, heavy with meanings she couldn't quite parse. Do we have an agreement? He asked again. Tamsin thought of her mother's tired eyes, her sister's cold dismissal, the whispers that would follow her forever now. Then she thought of escaping, of money enough to secure her family, of doors opening instead of slamming shut. She took his hand. We have an agreement. His grip was warm and firm, and something electric passed between their palms. He felt it too. She could tell by the slight widening of his eyes, but neither of them acknowledged it. Excellent. He released her hand with careful precision. Welcome to Ashworth House, Miss Harlow. Let's see how much trouble we can cause together. She just didn't know yet how much trouble that would be. Tamsin's belongings arrived at Ashworth House before she did. She hadn't expected that. hadn't considered the logistics of this arrangement beyond the immediate agreement. But when she returned home to pack, she found her mother already supervising 2 footmen in Hartwell livery, who were loading her modest trunk into a second carriage. His Grace sent word ahead, Lady Harlow said, her voice carefully neutral. He settled our accounts. All of them. The number she whispered made Tamsin's knees weak. Mother, don't. Lady Harlow pressed a hand to her daughter's cheek. Whatever this is, whatever you've agreed to, be careful. Dukes don't rescue shopkeepers' daughters without reason. I know. Do you? Her mother's eyes searched hers. You've always been too trusting, Tamsin. Too quick to see good where others might see opportunity. I'm not trusting him. I'm using him as much as he's using me. The words felt strange in her mouth, too hard-edged for the girl she'd always been. But that girl had been humiliated in front of 200 people and dismissed by her own sister. Perhaps it was time to become someone else. The return to Ashworth House felt different now that she was arriving as a resident, rather than a visitor. The footman bowed as she entered. A housekeeper in crisp black bombazine appeared, introducing herself as Mrs. Cordry, her expression betraying nothing beyond professional courtesy. Lady Sabine is waiting for you in the blue drawing room, miss. I'll have your things brought to your chambers. The blue drawing room lived up to its name, decorated in shades of cerulean and navy that made Tamsin feel like she'd stepped into the heart of a summer sky. And rising from the settee to greet her was a young woman who could only be the Duke's sister. Sabine Ashcroft was perhaps 19, with the same black hair as her brother, but warmer eyes, dark brown where his were winter sea. Her smile was immediate and genuine, lighting up her face in a way that made Tamsin's shoulders relax for the first time since the wedding. You're her. Sabine crossed the room in a rush of pale yellow muslin. The champagne catastrophe girl. I've been dying to meet you. Evander never brings anyone interesting home, and you've already caused more excitement than we've had in months. That's not exactly how I'd hoped to be remembered. Nonsense. Do you know how tedious society events are? The same conversations, the same dances, the same simpering misses trying to catch my brother's eye. Sabine linked her arm through Tamsin's, as if they'd known each other for years. You knocked over a champagne tower and fell into a duke's arms. That's practically legendary. Legendary isn't the word the gossips are using. The gossips can go hang. Sabine's cheerful dismissal was startling. Come, let me show you to your rooms. Evander's given you the Rose Suite, which has the best light in the house. I was terribly jealous until he pointed out that I already have the rooms I want. The Rose Suite was aptly named. Soft pink walls, cream moldings, a bed draped in silk the color of dawn. Windows that overlooked a private garden where roses climbed an ancient stone wall. A writing desk positioned to catch the morning sun. A dressing room larger than Tamsin's bedroom at home. This is too much, she breathed. This is exactly right. Sabine bounced onto the bed with complete disregard for decorum. If you're going to convince everyone you might become the next Duchess of Hartwell, you need to look the part. Speaking of which, the modiste arrives tomorrow. Madame Fournier, she's frightfully expensive and absolutely worth it. I can't accept. You can and you will. Sabine's voice softened. I know what Evander's proposed. He tells me everything, mostly because I pester him until he breaks. This arrangement benefits him far more than it benefits you, so the least he can do is ensure you're properly outfitted. Tamsin sank into a chair by the window, overwhelmed. 24 hours ago, she'd been bracing for another day of pitying glances and whispered mockery. Now she was sitting in a rose-colored paradise, being offered a wardrobe by a duke's sister. Why are you being so kind to me? Sabine's expression turned thoughtful. Because my brother hasn't smiled properly in 2 years. Not since our father died. Why, he performs duty, manages estates, attends Parliament, does everything expected of him. But he's not living. He's just existing. And you think I can change that? I think you're different from anyone he's encountered before. and different might be exactly what he needs. Sabine stood, smoothing her skirts. Dinner is at 8. I'll send Nell to help you dress. She'll be your lady's maid while you're here. Sabine. Tamsin stopped her at the door. Your grandmother. When will I meet her? The young woman's smile flickered. Tomorrow. She's requested a private audience first thing in the morning. A pause. Don't let her frighten you. Her bark is considerably worse than her bite. And her bite? Can be quite sharp indeed. But you survived falling into a champagne tower in front of half the ton. Surely one elderly duchess can't be worse than that. She departed with a swish of yellow muslin, leaving Tamsin alone with the roses and the silence and the growing certainty that tomorrow would test every ounce of courage she possessed. The Dowager Duchess of Hartwell received Tamsin in a morning room that felt less like a parlor and more like a throne room. Evander's grandmother sat in a high-backed chair positioned to catch the light, her silver hair perfectly arranged and her black morning gown immaculate, despite being 2 years past her son's death. She wore it like armor, like a statement of permanence in a world that kept trying to change around her. Sit. The single word carried more authority than most people's entire speeches. Tamsin sat. You were the girl who destroyed the Whitmore wedding celebration. I knocked over a champagne tower, Your Grace. The celebration continued. Don't be clever with me. The Dowager's pale blue eyes, a lighter shade than her grandson's but equally penetrating, swept over Tamsin with surgical precision. I've already had you investigated. Tamsin Harlow, second daughter of the late Bernard Harlow, merchant. Your father died 3 years ago, leaving significant debts. Your mother has been taking in mending to supplement your income. Your sister married well, but has made it clear she has no intention of supporting your branch of the family. Each fact landed like a stone dropped into still water. Tamsin forced herself not to flinch. You seem well informed, ought Your Grace. I make it my business to be informed about anyone who enters my grandson's orbit. The Dowager leaned forward slightly. Particularly young women who fall conveniently into his arms at public events. There was nothing convenient about it. I assure you, humiliation was not my goal. Wasn't it? Those cold eyes narrowed. You expect me to believe that a penniless merchant's daughter accidentally found herself caught by one of England's most eligible bachelors? I wasn't seeking him out. I was at my sister's wedding, and I fell because there was a wasp on my wrist, and I flinched at precisely the wrong moment. A wasp. Yes, Your Grace, a wasp, nature's tiniest saboteur. Tamsin met the older woman's gaze directly. I'm not clever enough to orchestrate the kind of scheme you're imagining. I can barely walk across a room without tripping over my own feet. The champagne incident was mortifying, not calculated. Silence stretched between them like wire pulled taut. Then the Dowager made a sound that might, in another woman, have been a laugh. You have spine. I didn't expect that. I have nothing left to lose, Your Grace. Spine comes easily when you've already hit bottom. Does it? The Dowager rose, moving to the window with a grace that belied her age. My grandson believes he can use you to escape Lady Sophronia. You believe you can use him to escape poverty. You're both fools. Tamsin's hands tightened in her lap. Perhaps. But we're fools with aligned interests. Aligned interests. The Dowager's gaze sharpened. Do you know why I've pushed the Blackwood match so relentlessly? Because Lady Sophronia is wealthy, connected, and suitable. Because my grandson is dying. The words fell like hammers. Not physically, but the man he was, the man his father raised him to be. That man has been disappearing since Marcus's death. He performs his duties. He manages his responsibilities. But he's hollowed out, Miss Harlow. Empty where there should be substance. Tamsin thought of Evander's guarded expressions, the bitter edge in his voice when he spoke of expectations, the way his eyes seemed to look through things rather than at them. You think marriage will fix that? I think purpose might. Legacy. a family of his own to build, rather than simply maintain. The Dowager's voice hardened. I thought Sophronia could provide that. She's ambitious enough to push him, demanding enough to keep him engaged. But he looks at her like she's a particularly tedious obligation. And that's what you want for him? An obligation? I want him alive. The raw edge in the Dowager's voice was startling. My son died believing Evander would carry on everything he built. Instead, I've watched my grandson fade into efficiency, becoming a perfect duke who feels nothing and wants nothing. What are you saying? Tamsin asked quietly. I'm saying that my son, Evander's father, never regretted marrying for love, even when that love brought him pain. I didn't approve of his choice either. What happened? She died giving birth to Sabine, and Marcus spent the next 20 years loving her memory more than any living woman could compete with. The Dowager's face showed old pain, decades of watching her son grieve. I didn't want that for Evander. I wanted him safely married to someone he could never love too deeply. Someone whose loss wouldn't destroy him. Like Lady Sophronia. Sophronia would never break his heart, because she'd never have it. The Dowager turned to face her. Let me be clear about what will happen, Miss Harlow. You will play your role. You will attend events on my grandson's arm. Society will gossip, speculate, and ultimately dismiss you as a passing fancy when the arrangement ends. I will not interfere with Evander's scheme. But if you hurt him. The Dowager's voice dropped to something cold and terrible. If you take advantage of whatever weakness led him to make this bargain, if you try to manipulate your way into a real match, I will destroy you, not your reputation, not your prospects. You. Do we understand each other? Tamsin rose, meeting the older woman's gaze without flinching. Perfectly, Your Grace. But you should understand something as well. I'm not here to trap your grandson. I'm here to survive. When this ends, I'll walk away with what was promised, and nothing more. I have no designs on becoming a duchess. Everyone has designs on becoming a duchess. Then I'm the exception. Tamsin moved toward the door, then paused. You said Evander looks at Lady Sophronia like an obligation. Has it occurred to you to wonder what he might look like with someone he actually chose? She left without waiting for an answer, her heart pounding against her ribs. In the hallway, she found Evander waiting, his expression carefully blank. You survived. Did you expect otherwise? My grandmother has reduced grown men to tears, and I wasn't certain what to expect. He fell into step beside her. What did she say? She threatened to destroy me if I hurt you. Ah, her standard greeting. Tamsin glanced at him sideways. She's worried about you. Beneath all the ice, she's genuinely frightened. Evander's jaw tightened. My grandmother doesn't know how to express concern without issuing commands. She believes control is the same as care. Isn't it? Sometimes. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. No. Care is asking what someone needs. Control is deciding for them. There was old pain in those words, layers of conflict she could only glimpse the edges of. Tamsin filed it away, another piece of the puzzle that was the Duke of Hartwell. She just didn't know yet how many pieces remained. 3 days into her residence at Ashworth House, Tamsin discovered the library. She'd been wandering, unable to sleep after another dinner where conversation had been polite but shallow, when she noticed light spilling from beneath a door. Curiosity overcame caution, and she pushed it open. The room took her breath away. 2 stories of books rose around her, shelves climbing toward a ceiling painted with celestial maps. Rolling ladders waited like patient servants. Deep leather chairs clustered near a fireplace, where embers still glowed. The smell of old paper and leather wrapped around her like an embrace. You found it. Tamsin spun, her heart lurching. Evander sat in a chair she hadn't noticed, half hidden in shadow, a book open in his lap. I'm sorry. I didn't realize anyone was here. I'll go. Stay. The word was quiet but definite. I don't own the room. You're welcome to explore. She hesitated, aware of her informal dress, the dressing gown she'd thrown over her nightclothes, but he didn't seem to notice or care, returning his attention to his book as if her presence was unremarkable. Tamsin moved along the shelves, letting her fingers trail across the spines. History, philosophy, poetry, science, collections that must have taken generations to assemble. My father started it, Evander said, as if reading her thoughts. His father considered books frivolous, but my father believed a man should know more than just how to manage his estates. He added something new every week. And you? I haven't added anything in 2 years. The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. Tamsin pulled down a volume at random, a collection of sonnets in Italian. Can you read this? Poorly. My father was the linguist. Evander set aside his own book. He spoke 6 languages fluently. I've managed 3 with moderate competence. Only 3. How shameful. The corner of his mouth twitched. You're mocking me. Only a little. She replaced the volume and chose another. What was he like, your father? The question seemed to surprise him. People probably avoided the topic, she realized, tiptoed around grief like it was something contagious. He was warm, Evander said finally. Warmer than a duke should be, according to my grandmother. He remembered servants' names, their families, their troubles. He believed position came with responsibility, not just privilege. You admired him. I worshipped him. The words came out rough. He was everything I wanted to be. And then he was gone. And I had to become him overnight. And I've been failing ever since. Tamsin turned from the shelves. You run the estates efficiently. You manage your responsibilities. I perform adequately. His voice was bitter. I fulfill obligations. But I don't remember the last time I did anything simply because I wanted to. The last time I felt anything that wasn't duty or guilt or the endless weight of expectations. What about anger? You seem to feel plenty of that. His laugh was sharp. Anger is the only emotion I have left. Everything else burned away when they told me he'd died. I was in Scotland, inspecting a property. By the time I returned, he'd already been buried. Tamsin's chest ached. You never got to say goodbye. The last words I spoke to him were about crop yields. He spat the word like poison. I could have told him how much he meant to me. Instead, I gave him a report. She moved without thinking, crossing the room to sit in the chair nearest his. You couldn't have known. I should have stayed. And then what? You'd have been there when he died. Yes, but he wanted you in Scotland. He trusted you with that task. Evander looked at her with something raw and broken in his eyes. How do you do that? Do what? Find the one interpretation that doesn't end in blame. Because I've spent years blaming myself for things I couldn't control. Tamsin's voice softened. My father made a bad investment. One decision that destroyed everything. For years, I told myself I should have stopped him. But we can't protect the people we love from every mistake. We can only love them through the consequences. Silence wrapped around them, broken only by the pop of dying embers. You're not what I expected, Evander said finally. What did you expect? Someone simpler, someone I could keep at arm's length. His blue-gray eyes held hers. You keep getting past my defenses. Is that a problem? I don't know yet. The honesty of it stole her breath. She was suddenly aware of how close they were, how the firelight painted gold across his features, how his eyes had warmed from winter storm to something softer. I should go to bed, she whispered. Yes. He didn't move. You should. Neither of them moved. I have something for you, he said suddenly, rising and crossing to his desk. He returned with a small wrapped package. I noticed you looking at the poetry section earlier this week. This was my father's favorite. She unwrapped it carefully, a leather-bound volume of verse, well-worn and obviously loved. Evander, I can't. You can. He would have wanted it read, not preserved like a relic. His voice dropped. And I want you to have something that belonged to someone who mattered. The gift felt heavier than its physical weight, more significant than a simple book should be. Thank you, she managed. The Pemberton Ball is in 3 days, Evander said, his voice strange. It will be our first public appearance together. Society will be watching for any crack in our performance. Then we should practice. Practice? His eyebrow rose. Dancing, conversation. Whatever we need to appear convincing. Tamsin stood, needing distance before she did something foolish. Tomorrow, perhaps, in the daylight, when we're both properly dressed and thinking clearly. Are you not thinking clearly now? The question was dangerous, unloaded with implications she wasn't ready to examine. Good night, Evander. She walked toward the door, but his voice stopped her. Tamsin. It was the first time he'd used her name. The sound of it in his voice did something strange to her heartbeat. Yes? Thank you. For listening. For not treating my grief like something shameful. Thank you for trusting me with it. She left before she could say anything else, climbing the stairs to her rose-colored room with her pulse racing and his father's book clutched against her chest. This was supposed to be a performance, a business arrangement. But standing in that library, watching grief crack through his armor, holding a gift that meant more than he'd ever admit, she'd felt something shift, something that felt terrifyingly like the beginning of real. And she didn't know whether to run toward it or away. The Pemberton Ball blazed like a jewel in the London night. Tamsin watched through the carriage window as they inched closer, her stomach tight with nerves. Breathe, Evander murmured beside her. You look like you're approaching an execution. Aren't I? His low laugh warmed something in her chest. It's only a ball, a few hundred people, some dancing. Nothing you haven't survived before. I survived my sister's wedding by knocking over a champagne tower. Forgive me if my confidence is limited. Sabine, seated across from them in a gown of deep violet, leaned forward. You're going to be magnificent. Madame Fournier's dress alone will silence half the critics. The dress was extraordinary. Deep emerald silk that made her eyes luminous. The cut in the latest fashion with delicate gold embroidery along the bodice. When she'd seen herself in the mirror, she'd barely recognized the woman looking back. Remember, Evander said as the carriage stopped, you belong here tonight. Anyone who questions that questions me. The possessive edge in his voice sent heat rushing through her veins. The Pemberton ballroom was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers, mirrors multiplying the crowd into infinity, silk and jewels and perfume. Heads turned as they entered. The Duke of Hartwell. Is that the Harlow girl? She doesn't look clumsy tonight. Tamsin kept her chin high, letting Evander guide her through the gauntlet of stairs. Hartwell. A portly man approached, his florid face beaming. And who is this lovely creature? Lord Pemberton. May I present Miss Tamsin Harlow? Harlow. Aunt Harlow. Pemberton's brow furrowed. Any relation to the Whitmore wedding? The bride is my sister. Splendid affair, that. Welcome to my humble gathering, Miss Harlow. They moved on, navigating through clusters of onlookers. Sabine materialized at Tamsin's side, whispering context about each notable face. Lady Marchmont at 3 o'clock. Terrible gossip, but influential. Mrs. Thornbury behind her, harmless but dull. And approaching from the left. Lady Sophronia, Evander said flatly. She swept toward them in silver, beautiful and cold. Your Grace, what a delightful surprise. Her eyes slid to Tamsin. Miss Harlow, I see you've managed to remain upright this evening. How encouraging. One learns from experience, Lady Sophronia. No, I make it a point never to knock over champagne towers twice in the same month. Sabine made a strangled sound. Something flickered in Sophronia's eyes, surprise at finding claws beneath Tamsin's mild exterior. How droll. I suppose one must find humor where one can, given one's circumstances. Indeed, though I've never had to manufacture amusement, it seems to find me naturally. The air between them crackled with tension. Sophronia's smile turned brittle. "The first waltz is about to begin," Evander interrupted. "If you'll excuse us." He led her toward the dance floor with purposeful strides. "That was reckless," he murmured. "She insulted me. Was I supposed to accept it?" "Most people do. I'm not most people." The music began, and they moved together with easy grace. But this was different from practice. Hundreds of eyes tracked their every step, analyzed their every glance. "They're watching," Tamsin whispered. "Let them watch." Evander pulled her slightly closer than proper. "Give them something worth watching." She looked up and found his eyes on her, with an intensity that stole her breath. Not cool assessment, but something heated. Real. "Evander, don't speak. Just dance. Just be here with me." They moved through the waltz, like they were the only two people in the room. The music swelled around them, carrying them through turns and glides that felt less like choreography and more like conversation. Every touch of his hand communicated something. Every brush of their bodies asked a question. When the music ended, Sabine appeared at their elbow. "That was the most romantic thing I've ever witnessed. Half the room is swooning, but the other half is plotting your demise." The rest of the evening passed in a whirl. Tamsin danced with several lords, but kept circling back to Evander, like a planet caught in orbit. During the supper dance, he leaned close. "You've been magnificent tonight." "I've been terrified." The two aren't mutually exclusive. His lips almost brushed her ear. "Come to the garden with me. There's a terrace with fewer eyes." She knew she should refuse, but she followed him anyway. Out through the French doors, into the cool darkness. Lanterns dotted the pathways. They found a secluded bench surrounded by climbing roses. "Why did you really bring me out here?" Tamsin asked. "Because I needed to stop performing." He turned, something raw showing through his masks. "And you're the only person I can do that with." "Evander, but we agreed." "I know what we agreed. I also know that when I'm dancing with you, I forget why I ever needed an arrangement at all. I forget my grandmother's schemes and Sophronia's ambitions and every expectation that's been crushing me for 2 years." He stepped closer. "I forget everything except you." Tamsin's breath caught. "You can't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because they make this harder. Because in a few weeks this ends, and I go back to being nobody. And you'll marry someone suitable." "I don't want someone suitable." His voice cracked. "I want someone who makes me feel alive. Someone who sees past the title to the man drowning underneath. I want your grace." Lady Sophronia emerged from the shadows, her smile triumphant. "How fortunate I found you. Your grandmother has been asking for you. Both of you." The moment shattered. "We'll return shortly," Evander said coldly. "I'll let her grace know to expect you." Sophronia glided away, but not before casting a look of pure venom at Tamsin. "She'll tell everyone," Tamsin whispered, "that she found us alone in the garden. We face my grandmother together. Whatever happens." But as they walked back toward the ballroom, Tamsin felt impending disaster settling over her shoulders like a shroud. The dowager received them in a private parlor, her pale blue eyes missing nothing. "Lady Sophronia tells me she found you in the gardens, alone, after a display on the dance floor that has set tongues wagging throughout the ballroom." "We were taking air," Tamsin said. "Nothing improper occurred." "Impropriety is determined by perception, Miss Harlow, not intent." The dowager's gaze sharpened. "I watched you dance tonight, Evander. I've seen you partner countless women at countless balls. You've never looked at any of them the way you looked at her. Grandmother, don't pretend this is still just an arrangement. Something has changed. I can see it in both of you." Tamsin felt heat flood her face. The dowager was right. Something had changed. was still changing. Every moment she spent with Evander pulled her deeper into something she'd never intended. "What do you want me to say?" Evander's voice was weary. "That I've developed feelings I didn't anticipate. Fine, I admit it, but that changes nothing about the fundamental situation. It changes everything." The Dowager's composure cracked, revealing the worry beneath. "Before, you were playing a game, and now you're risking your heart on a woman who can offer you nothing but scandal. She offers me more than anyone else ever has." The words hung in the air, raw and honest, and terrifying. Tamsin's heart lurched. "Evander," she whispered, "don't." "Why not? Why shouldn't I say it?" He turned to her, his blue-gray eyes blazing. "I'm tired of pretending, Tamsin. Tired of performing for society and managing my grandmother's expectations and being the perfect empty duke everyone expects. You make me want to be real. You make me want to feel things again, even if feeling means risking pain. Because it will end." Tears pricked at her eyes. "Because I'll leave, and you'll marry someone your grandmother approves of. And this will become a story you tell about your foolish youth. That's not. It's exactly what will happen." She turned to the Dowager, desperate for an ally she never expected to seek. Tell him how this ends. He's a duke, and I'm a merchant's daughter with a borrowed wardrobe and a talent for knocking things over. There's no future here. There's only a temporary fantasy that's gotten out of hand." The Dowager studied her with an expression Tamsin couldn't read. "You believe that? I know that. I've known it from the beginning. This arrangement was supposed to buy him time and buy me security. It was never supposed to become—" Her voice broke. "It was never supposed to become real. But it has." Evander's voice was quiet now, stripped of defiance. "Hasn't it?" Tamsin couldn't answer, couldn't look at him, couldn't acknowledge the truth trembling on the edge of her tongue. "Leave us." The Dowager's command was directed at Evander. "I wish to speak with Miss Harlow alone." "Grandmother." "Now, Evander." He hesitated, his gaze searching Tamsin's face for some sign of what she wanted. She gave him nothing, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor until she heard the door open and close. "Sit down, child." The Dowager's voice was surprisingly gentle. "Before you fall down?" Tamsin sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "I was wrong about you," the Dowager said finally. "I thought you were a fortune hunter using circumstance to trap a duke. I see now that you're something far more dangerous." "I'm not dangerous. You're a woman my grandson is falling in love with. There's nothing more dangerous in the world." The Dowager leaned forward. "I've watched Evander retreat into duty since his father's death. I've watched him become a perfect duke and an empty man. I've tried to give him purpose through marriage, through legacy, through all the tools I understand, and none of it has worked. I haven't done anything. You've made him feel. That's everything." The Dowager's pale eyes held hers. "I still believe this match is unsuitable. I still believe it will cause scandal and difficulty. But I also believe my grandson hasn't truly lived since his father died. And tonight, dancing with you, he was alive again." Tamsin's tears spilled over. "I can't be what he needs." "Perhaps not. Perhaps this will end in disaster and broken hearts. But perhaps—" The Dowager's voice softened. "Perhaps I've been so focused on what's suitable that I've forgotten what's necessary. What do you want me to do? Be honest with yourself. And with him." The Dowager rose, moving toward the door. "If you don't love him, tell him now. Let him recover before he falls too far. But if you do love him, stop running from it. Love isn't logical, Miss Harlow. It never has been." She left, and Tamsin sat alone in the elegant parlor, her heart cracking open. Minutes later, Evander appeared in the doorway. "My grandmother said you had something to tell me." Tamsin rose on unsteady legs. "I'm terrified. Of wanting this. Of believing it could be real. of letting myself hope, and then watching it all collapse. I'm terrified too. He crossed to her, his fingers brushing her cheek with heartbreaking tenderness. But I'm more terrified of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try. Evander, tell me you don't feel this. His voice was rough, desperate. Tell me it's all performance, and I'll walk away. I'll find some suitable bride and fulfill my obligations, and never mention tonight again. But if you feel even a fraction of what I feel. She kissed him. It wasn't graceful. She stumbled forward, her hands fisting in his lapels, her mouth finding his with more desperation than finesse. But he caught her. He always caught her, his arms wrapping around her waist and pulling her close. The kiss deepened, became something hungry and honest and absolutely real. His hands tangled in her hair, dislodging pins. Her fingers traced the planes of his face, memorizing angles and textures. They kissed like they were drowning, and each other was air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "Tell me that was real," he whispered. "That was real." He kissed her again, softer this time, full of promise rather than desperation. And Tamsin let herself believe, just for this moment, that maybe impossible things could happen after all. But outside the parlor, through the door left slightly ajar, neither of them noticed a flash of silver silk disappearing around the corner, and they didn't hear Sophronia's quiet laugh of triumph. The scandal broke at breakfast. Tamsin came down to find the morning paper spread across the table, Sabine's face pale, and Evander standing by the window with his jaw clenched. "What's happened?" Sabine wordlessly handed her a paper, and the Duke's dalliance, Hartwell heir, caught in compromising embrace with merchant's daughter. The article detailed their clandestine meeting in the gardens, their scandalous disappearance into a private parlor, and most damningly included a description of their kiss that could only have come from someone who'd witnessed it. Sophronia, Tamsin breathed. She sold the story to 3 papers. Evander's voice was controlled fury. "By noon, every drawing room will be discussing how I've been seduced by a scheming fortune hunter." The words hit like physical blows. Seduced. Scheming. Fortune hunter. "That's not... I know." He turned, his eyes anguished. "I know you didn't. But it doesn't matter what's true. It matters what people believe. Can we deny it? A dozen people saw us enter that parlor alone." Sabine's voice was grim. "So denial won't work." The dowager swept in, her face carved from ice. "Sophronia is claiming you seduced her intended. Her mother is threatening to ruin Miss Harlow so thoroughly, she'll never show her face in polite society again." "Her intended?" Evander laughed bitterly. "I never offered for her. I never so much as indicated interest." "That's not the story she's telling. According to Lady Blackwood, you had an understanding." The walls closed in around Tamsin. She could see it all unfolding, the whispers becoming accusations, the curious glances becoming condemnation. Her mother's modest house surrounded by gossips. Ginevra's perfect life tainted by association with her scandalous sister. "I have to leave." "Tamsin." "No." She stepped back from Evander's reaching hand. "Don't you see? Staying makes this worse. Every day I remain under your roof is another day the gossip grows. If I leave now, disappear back to where I came from, the story dies. You can marry someone appropriate and pretend this never happened. I don't want to pretend this never happened." "What you want doesn't matter anymore," her voice cracked. "What I want doesn't matter. This is about survival, Evander. Your family's reputation, your sister's prospects, your ability to do any good in Parliament or society. All of it destroyed because you kissed a clumsy merchant's daughter in a private parlor." "I kissed the woman I love." The words hung in the air like a held breath. "Don't." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Don't say that. Not now. Not when I have to leave. You don't have to do anything. Yes, I do. She looked at the Dowager, at Sabine, at the newspapers spread across the table like evidence of a crime. I knew this was temporary. I knew it would end badly. I just didn't expect it to end like this. She turned and walked out of the room before anyone could stop her. Upstairs, she packed with numb efficiency. The beautiful gowns went back into the wardrobe. They'd never been hers anyway. She took only what she'd arrived with: one modest dress, her mother's pearls, and the book of verse Evander had given her. A knock at the door. The Dowager entered. "You're running." "I'm protecting him. There's a difference." "Is there?" The older woman moved to the window. "I ran once. When Marcus told me he intended to marry Evander's mother, I did everything in my power to stop it. I told myself I was protecting my son. In reality, I was protecting myself from fear. This isn't the same, isn't it?" The Dowager turned. "You're afraid that staying means hoping, and hoping means the possibility of even greater pain. So you're choosing a lesser pain now to avoid a greater one later. I'm choosing to spare him a scandal. You're choosing for him, just as I chose for Marcus." The Dowager's voice softened. "I was wrong then. But I think you should at least say goodbye properly. He deserves that much." Tamsin found Evander in the library. "I'm leaving." "I know." He didn't turn. "Grandmother told me." "Evander, don't explain." His voice was hollow. "I understand the logic. I even understand why you believe it's true." "Then why do you sound so angry?" "Because you're not giving us a chance." He finally turned, his eyes red-rimmed. "You've decided this can't work, so you're not even willing to try. You're so certain of disaster that you're creating one. The disaster already exists. It's in every newspaper in London. Scandals pass. Gossip fades. In 6 months, society will have found new prey." He crossed to her, taking her hands. "But if you leave now, if you disappear without fighting for this, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been. You'll find someone else, someone suitable." "I don't want someone else." The words tore from him. "I want your clumsiness, and your courage, and the way you see past my masks to the person underneath. I want to argue with you in libraries, and dance with you at balls, and spend every morning watching you knock things over during breakfast." Despite everything, a watery laugh escaped her. "That's a terrible sales pitch." "It's the truth." He lifted her hand to his lips. "Stay. Please. Let's face this together." She wanted to. God, how she wanted to. But then she thought of her mother's face when the gossip reached her door, of Ginevra's cold dismissal becoming justified, of every person who'd ever called her graceless being proven right. "I can't." She pulled her hands free. "I'm sorry, Evander. I'm so sorry." She left before she could change her mind. As the carriage pulled away, she looked back once. Evander stood in the doorway of Ashworth House, watching her go, and the devastation on his face shattered something inside her chest. But she didn't ask the driver to stop. Home was smaller than Tamsin remembered. The modest parlor, the worn furniture, the smell of her mother's lavender water. All of it familiar, all of it suffocating. She'd been back 3 days, and each hour stretched like a week. Her mother had asked no questions when Tamsin arrived, pale and red-eyed, with a single bag and a heart in pieces. She'd simply opened her arms and held her daughter while she cried. The newspapers kept coming. Each day brought fresh speculation, fresh cruelty. Merchant's daughter flees Duke's household. Hartwell scandal deepens. Jilted Lady Sophronia vows vengeance. Tamsin stopped reading after the 3rd day. On the 4th day, Felix grimly appeared at the door. "Miss Harlow." He bowed, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "Mr. Grimley, what are you doing here?" "Delivering a message from the Duke." Her heart lurched painfully. "I don't want. Please." The word was surprisingly sincere. "Just hear me out. Then I'll leave, and you'll never have to see my face again." 5 minutes. Felix pulled a letter from his coat. "He's been writing to you. Did you know that? Every day since you left. But the letters keep coming back unopened. I can't read them. That's why he sent me." Felix set the letter on the table. "He's not eating, Tamsin. Not sleeping. His sister says he's barely spoken in 3 days. The great Duke of Hartwell, reduced to a ghost in his own house. I didn't break anything. I prevented worse damage." "Did you?" Felix's voice sharpened. "I've known you since we were children. I've watched you defer to your sister, hide in corners, apologize for existing. You've never once fought for anything you wanted. The moment something gets difficult, you retreat. You have no right. I have every right. I'm watching 2 people destroy themselves because neither is brave enough to choose the hard thing." He moved toward the door. "Read the letter. Or don't. But know that a man who could have any woman in England is wasting away because he wants you. The question is whether you're brave enough to want him back." He left. The letter sat like a challenge. Tamsin stared at it for an hour before breaking the seal. "My dearest Tamsin, I've written this letter 17 times. Each version sounds either too desperate or too restrained, and none of them capture what I actually want to say. So let me try simplicity. I love you. Not the idea of you, not the convenience of our arrangement. I love you, your courage, your kindness, your absolute refusal to be impressed by my title. I love the way you stumble through crowded rooms and somehow manage to look graceful doing it. You're afraid. I understand. You think this can't work, that our worlds are too different, that the scandal will swallow us both. Perhaps you're right. But here's what I know. I spent 2 years being safe, being appropriate, being exactly the Duke everyone expected, and I was miserable, empty, dead inside while still breathing. Then you fell into my arms at a wedding, covered in champagne and mortification, and everything changed. I'm not asking you to be certain. I'm not asking you to guarantee a happy ending. I'm just asking you to try, to be brave with me, to risk the possibility of pain for the possibility of something extraordinary. Come back to me, Tamsin, or tell me to stop hoping. But don't leave me in this limbo, loving you and unable to reach you. Yours, always and completely, Evander Tamsin read the letter 3 times. Then she went to find her mother. "I need to go back to London." Lady Harlow looked up from her mending, unsurprised. "I wondered how long it would take." "You're not going to try to stop me?" "Should I?" Her mother set aside her needle. "You've been half alive since you came home, going through the motions without any light behind your eyes. If that young man makes you feel something, even if that something is terrifying, then perhaps it's worth the risk. The scandal will fade. Scandals always do." Lady Harlow smiled softly. "Your father was considered unsuitable when he courted me, a merchant pursuing a gentleman's daughter. My family was horrified. They said I was throwing my life away. You never told me that. Because it didn't matter. I loved him. He loved me. We built a good life together, even when things got difficult." Her mother took her hands. "You've spent your whole life being careful, Tamsin, being safe, making yourself small so you wouldn't cause trouble. Maybe it's time to be brave instead." Tamsin thought of Evander's letter, of Felix's challenge, of the rose-colored room and the library, and the way Evander had looked at her when they danced. What if I'm not brave enough? You knocked over a champagne tower in front of 200 people and then negotiated terms with a duke. Her mother laughed. "I think you're braver than you know." The next morning, Tamsin was on a coach to London. She had no plan beyond showing up at Ashworth House. No speech prepared, no grand gesture arranged, just a heart full of terrifying hope. But when she arrived at Grosvenor Square, she found the townhouse dark. A neighbor's servant, bribed with a few coins, provided the explanation. "The Duke left yesterday, miss, for his country estate. Said he'd be gone indefinitely." Tamsin stared at the darkened windows, her heart sinking. Then she squared her shoulders and started walking toward the coaching inn. If Evander had retreated to the country, she'd follow him there. She was done running. It was time to fight. Hartwell Abbey rose from the Devonshire hills, like something from a fairy tale, its ancient stones softened by centuries of weather and ivy. Tamsin's hired cart deposited her at the main gate, and she stood there for a long moment, gathering her courage. Then she walked up the drive. The butler who answered the door was ancient, dignified, and clearly shocked to see a travel-worn young woman demanding to see the Duke. "His Grace is not receiving visitors." "He'll receive me." Tamsin lifted her chin. "Tell him Tamsin Harlow is here. Tell him I read his letter. Tell him." She hesitated, then committed fully. "Tell him I'm ready to be brave." The butler's eyebrows rose fractionally, but he disappeared into the house's depths. Tamsin waited in the enormous entrance hall, surrounded by portraits of stern Ashcroft ancestors who seemed to be judging her. "Miss Harlow." She spun. The dowager stood at the top of the stairs, her expression unreadable. "Your Grace, I didn't realize you'd be here. I came to knock some sense into my grandson. It seems you've saved me the trouble." The dowager descended with measured grace. "He's in the East Garden, through that door, down the corridor, out past the conservatory." Tamsin hesitated. "You're not going to try to stop me?" "I've spent 2 years trying to control Evander's future. It's gotten me nothing but grief, and a grandson who looks at me like I'm his jailer." The dowager's voice carried an edge of bitter self-reflection. "Perhaps it's time to try something different." Tamsin nodded and moved toward the indicated door. She was almost through when the dowager's voice stopped her. "Miss Harlow, if you hurt him again, there won't be a corner of England where you can hide. If I hurt him again, I'll deserve whatever you do." The East Garden was wild compared to the formal grounds she'd glimpsed from the drive. Overgrown roses tangled along ancient stone walls. A fountain burbled somewhere nearby. And sitting on a bench beneath an oak tree, his head in his hands, was Evander. He looked terrible. Unshaven, exhausted, his coat wrinkled as if he'd slept in it. "You look awful." His head snapped up. For a moment he simply stared, as if she were an apparition he couldn't quite trust. "Tamsin, I read your letter." She stopped a few feet away, suddenly uncertain. All 17 versions worth of feeling, apparently. "You came." His voice cracked. "You actually came." "I was going to wait at Ashworth House, but you'd already fled to the countryside. Very dramatic. I thought—" He rose slowly. "I thought you were done. I thought I'd lost you. I've spent my whole life being careful, Evander, being the graceless sister who never caused trouble, because causing trouble meant being noticed, and being noticed meant being found wanting." She took a breath. "When I fell into your arms at that wedding, I was mortified. When you proposed this arrangement, I was desperate. When I started falling in love with you, I was terrified. And when the scandal broke, I ran. And now? Now I'm tired of running." She closed the distance between them. "Now I'm standing in your garden, looking like a disaster after a day on public coaches, telling a duke that I love him. Even though it's impractical. Even though it might end badly. Even though every sensible voice in my head is screaming that this is madness. It is madness." He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek. "The best possible kind. I don't know how to be a duchess. I'll probably knock over champagne towers at every event. I'll embarrass you in front of Parliament. He kissed her. When they broke apart, he kept his forehead pressed against hers. "I don't want a perfect duchess. I want you. I want champagne catastrophes, and library conversations, and a lifetime of catching you when you fall. Your grandmother will be horrified." "My grandmother." The dowager's voice came from behind them. has already resigned herself to the inevitable. They turned to find her at the edge of the garden. I came to tell you that Lady Sophronia has overplayed her hand. Her role in selling the scandal to the papers has become public knowledge. Society is turning against her. The sympathy is shifting. What are you saying? Tamsin asked. I'm saying that my son, Evander's father, never regretted marrying for love. I'm saying that if you make my grandson happy, I will learn to accept you. Even if it takes time, and even if it goes against everything I was raised to believe. Evander reached out and took his grandmother's hand. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I still expect proper grandchildren. At least 3. The dowager sniffed. And a proper wedding. None of this elopement nonsense. Tamsin laughed despite herself, and something in the dowager's expression softened. Welcome to the family, Miss Harlow. God help us all. The Ashworth wedding was the event of the season, not because of its grandeur, though the Abbey was decorated beautifully, not because of the guest list, though half the ton had somehow secured invitations, but because everyone wanted to witness the impossible. The Duke of Hartwell marrying the clumsy merchant's daughter who'd knocked over a champagne tower and somehow conquered London. Tamsin stood before the mirror in the bridal chambers, barely recognizing herself. The gown was ivory silk with gold embroidery, Madame Fournier's masterpiece. Her mother's pearls graced her throat. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style. You look like a duchess, Sabine said from the doorway. I feel like an imposter. You felt like an imposter for 3 months. When does that stop? I'll let you know. Sabine crossed to her, taking both her hands. He loves you. Absurdly. Completely. The kind of love poets write about and sensible people dismiss as fiction. I know. Tamsin's voice wavered. That's what terrifies me. Good. Terror means you understand what you have. Sabine squeezed her fingers. Now let's go before he convinces himself you've changed your mind. The Abbey chapel was full. Tamsin glimpsed familiar faces as she walked down the aisle on her mother's arm, a breach of tradition the dowager had permitted, with only minimal protest. She saw Ginevra, her expression complicated, but no longer cold. She saw Felix, looking uncomfortable but present. She saw the dowager herself, silver-haired and imperious, dabbing at her eyes. And at the altar, waiting for her, stood Evander. He looked nothing like the controlled stranger who'd caught her at her sister's wedding. His eyes were bright with emotion. You came. I came. I half expected you to trip on the train and knock over the altar candles. The day is young. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and rings. When the vicar pronounced them married, Evander kissed her with tenderness that made the guests sigh. The reception was held in the great hall, in tables laden with food, champagne flowing freely. Tamsin watched the golden liquid being poured and felt a familiar flutter. Don't even think about it, Evander said, following her gaze. I wasn't. You were calculating the proximity of your elbow to the nearest champagne tower, she laughed. There isn't actually a champagne tower. I had them removed from the design, preventative measures. You didn't. I absolutely did. The toasts began. Sabine told an embarrassing story about Evander's childhood. The dowager's words were brief but genuine. To my grandson and his bride, may they find in each other what his father found in his mother. A love worth any scandal. Then, unexpectedly, Ginevra stood. I owe my sister an apology. I spent most of our lives thinking she was an embarrassment. The clumsy one, and the graceless one. Ginevra's eyes met Tamsin's. I was wrong. Tamsin isn't graceless. She's the bravest person I know. She walked into a world that had every reason to reject her, and made it love her anyway. Tears pricked at Tamsin's eyes. To my sister, Ginevra raised her glass, the Duchess of Hartwell. May she knock over 1,000 champagne towers and never apologize for any of them. Later, Evander led her onto the dance floor. "I have something for you." He withdrew a small velvet box. Inside lay a gold bracelet with a single charm, a tiny champagne flute. "To commemorate how we met. It's perfect. You're perfect. I'm a disaster. My disaster. Forever." 6 months later, the Dowager's Christmas ball was legendary. Tamsin stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching her husband charm a group of elderly countesses. You're staring." The Dowager appeared beside her. "Am I not allowed to stare at my own husband?" "You can do anything you want. You're a duchess." The older woman's gaze softened. He laughs now. Properly laughs. I'd forgotten what that sounded like. Evander appeared moments later. "Dance with me?" "We've already danced twice. People will talk." "Let them talk." "I have news," Tamsin said as they moved across the floor. "Oh?" "The kind that might require the nursery to be prepared." Evander stopped moving. "Are you saying?" "In approximately 7 months, you're going to need to child-proof all the champagne towers in England." His whoop of joy echoed through the ballroom. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her while the aristocracy watched in scandalized delight. "Put me down. Everyone's staring. Let them stare. And my wife just made me the happiest man in the world." 3 years later, the christening was beautiful, but Tamsin was ready for it to be over. Her daughter, Lady Helena Ashcroft, had screamed through most of the ceremony. Her 2-year-old son, Marcus, had tried to climb into the baptismal font. And Tamsin had tripped over the bishop's robes. "Some things never change," she muttered. "Would you want them to?" Evander caught Marcus before he could chase a butterfly. "I fell in love with a woman who knocked over champagne towers. I'd be terribly disappointed if she suddenly became graceful." They walked through the gardens of Hartwell Abbey, their children between them. "I have something for you," Evander said. He guided her to a bench where a wrapped package waited. Inside was a painting, a ballroom, a champagne tower mid-collapse, a woman falling into a dark-haired man's arms. "I commissioned it from memory, the moment everything changed. I love it. I love you." He pulled her close. "I love our disaster of a life." "Happy anniversary, by the way." "It's not our anniversary." "No, but it's the anniversary of something else." She smiled. "Nearly 4 years ago, I knocked over a champagne tower and fell into my future husband's arms. The best accident of my life. And mine." They sat as the afternoon faded to gold, watching their children play, surrounded by a love neither of them had ever expected to find. Some stories began with grace and elegance and perfect first impressions. Theirs had begun with a wasp, a champagne tower, and a duke who wouldn't look away. And really, that was a much better beginning anyway. Thank you for being here. And you are the reason these stories exist. Because you believe in love that chooses courage over convenience, in characters who fight for happiness despite the odds, in endings that feel earned and true. Your presence makes this space warm and welcoming, and I'm grateful for every moment you spend with these characters. Do you have a favorite line or scene? Your engagement helps me understand what moves you, what keeps you listening, and what kinds of stories to create next. Consider subscribing if you'd like more romances with emotional depth and genuine character growth. Thank you for being here. You make this community what it is.